Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Beverly School Committee's joint meeting of Finance and Facilities with the Committee of the Whole. Tonight we have two chairs during this joint session, or a meeting within a meeting, so thank you for being present this evening and for bearing with us in this remote setting. Today is Wednesday, June 24th, 2020. We are meeting virtually by using a remote meeting application that is provided at no cost to our district. BevCam is presently setting up to record a city council meeting tonight. So I will be recording this meeting for rebroadcast later. As well, the agenda posted included a link for members of the public to attend within this application. This is allowed under the Governor's March 12th, 2020 order entitled Order Suspending Certain Provisions of the Open Meeting Law, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20. This order specifically suspends the need for a quorum and the chair to be physically present and asks for our body to use technical methods to allow public access. Joining us tonight are members of the school committee, our citizen representatives, invited guests for our agenda topics, and various members of the district administration and leadership teams. We will conduct a full roll call of attendance in a moment for the record. As a preliminary matter, we will specifically be watching for people who want to be recognized by the chairs. In case you're not visible on the screen due to there being too many participants, please use the hand raise button within the application, or simply speak up if you feel like you might be missed. I also wanted to let you know that it may be necessary to disable your video camera if your quality of connection seems to be degrading, and usually this will allow the audio to recover. I would ask that we try not to use the chat function unless it relates to a technical difficulty with hearing or being heard, as all of the chat functionality is recorded and becomes part of the public record. I also ask that you please endeavor to speak clearly into the microphone so that we will have an adequate record. Also, please remember that any audio or video that you supply on this platform will become part of the meeting. As such, you may use your mute functionality to prevent background noises or disable your video as necessary. The chair will call on you to unmute when you're being recognized. Okay, members, I would now like to conduct a roll call confirmation that you're able to see and hear me. I will be calling on the school committee members, and I really can't see everyone on one screen. So Mayor Cahill, are you with us yet? I don't think I see him yet.
I don't see him, Madam Chair.
Okay. Kimberly Coelho, I think I just saw you. There.
Yes.
Perfect. John Milady, we saw and heard you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Karen Robinson, we also see and can hear you. And Lorinda Visnick.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. John, you might need to mute again.
Oh, we don't want to hear Matilda on tape?
No, thank you, though. Miss Kelly Ferretti, are you with us yet? I don't think I see her yet. And Rachel Abel. And then also present we have Dr. Chirocek, John Harmon, Jean Sherburne, Bethany Splansky. Ms. Visnick, while I'm on a roll, I'll say that Laura Harrison is here, our recording secretary for FNF. We also have Julie Flowers joining us, even though I know you need to run off, I'm sure. We have Paul Manzo, and we have yes, Lindsay Descharmes. Lindsay Descharmes. I think that's all that I have on the record right now, Laura, but I will keep an eye open if we have more. So, for all intents and purposes, Committee of the Whole has been called to order. The supporting materials for tonight's agenda were distributed to members in email threads. To the public, all these materials will be part of the public record on beverlyschools.org. They'll be posted in a timely manner. And much of what will be presented will be shown on screen as well, as much as I'm able to get the files up fast enough. As a final reminder, any and all votes or actions taken this evening will be done by a roll call vote called by the chair of the respective committees. We anticipate entering executive session at the end of the Committee of the Whole meeting and will not be returning to open session. Okay. With that, Ms. Visnick, why don't you call FNF to order while I find the flag?
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Ms. Abel. So today is, as President Abel said, June 24th. Is approximately 6:37, and I'm calling the Standing Committee on Facilities and Finance to order. Everyone who is in attendance has already been named by Ms. Abel, and Ms. Abel, I will pass back to you to pick someone to lead us in the pledge.
Oh, I'm going to ask one of our citizen reps. I think Ms. Lindsay Descharmes, you can come off mute and lead us in the pledge.
Oh my gosh, are you serious? All right.
Yes.
I'll give this my best.
Thank you.
This is going to be embarrassing. All right. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United
States of America and
to the republic
for
which it stands,
One
nation,
under
under God, indivisible, with liberty
and
and justice for all.
Yeah,
Thanks,
Comcast. Yeah, we have a little latency on our Comcast, right? Our only service provider. Oh, we love you, Comcast. Thanks. Okay. With that, the chair of FNF, Ms. Visnick, I'll let you roll through the first 4 additional agenda items.
Fantastic. And you're going to place that agenda back up, Ms. Abel. Our first order of business, and again, FNF, we're going to try to go pretty quickly. Ms. Flowers is here as a city council rep, and she has to go to her own budget hearing. Not a hearing, I'm sorry. The city council is voting on the budget, and that meeting starts at 7 p.m. this evening. So our first order of business is approval of our meeting minutes from our last meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. All right, really, I can't see everybody at once, so.
Second.
All right, thank you. Laura, do you have any idea who made those motions?
I'm going, no, I'm having the same thought. I'm going through the top, trying to figure out who's who. Okay, oh, sorry. Can you say your name?
Exactly. When you make your motion, can you please identify yourself?
Yes, Karen Robinson.
Thank you.
And who seconded?
Kim Coelho.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Does anybody have any comments or corrections on the meeting minutes? I'm making my window as big as I can so I can try to see as many of you as I can at a time. The other thing you can do is if you open the participants panel, you can put your hand up, and Ms. Abel and I try to watch. There's a little icon. You can put your hand up, or you can put your hand up on your video camera. All right. Are there any comments or corrections on the meeting minutes? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. It has to be a roll call vote. Laura, do you wish to call the roll, or do you want me to?
It's totally up to you. I think you're probably more qualified than I am, so
All right, we'll
take it away.
We'll start with our citizen reps. Mr. Manzo.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Ducharme.
She's shaking yes.
She's shaking.
All right.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Thank
can
you.
you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Thank you very much. Ms. Robinson.
Yes.
Ms. Coelho.
Yes.
Thank you. Myself, yes. If I count correctly, that's 5. That motion passes 5-0. All right. For the record, it is 6:41, and Ms. Ferretti just joined us. Our next item on our agenda is a review of the Buildings and Grounds report from Mr. Tim Howland and Mike Collins. And the way we've been handling this is that if we have any questions, I didn't see any come in ahead of time. Jean, did you have any sent to you ahead of time?
No, I did not.
All right, that said, I will open the floor if anybody has any questions in real time, knowing that we may well have to get back to you with an answer for your question. Does anybody have any questions on the B&G report?
Lindsay has her hand up.
Oh, very nice job. Ms. Ducharme.
Sorry, I was looking for the hand flag emoji. I have a general question, not specific to the report, so I can hold my question to the end if that's easier.
Is it a buildings and grounds question?
Yeah, I think it probably falls under the building and grounds umbrella of questions.
Okay.
But I don't want to interrupt if somebody else has a question specific to the report.
I saw no other hands.
Okay. So my question is really about entry into the school system, or the potential of that for our kids to return to school in the fall, and whether or not and how Building and Grounds is equipped to handle testing, if there is any thought for testing of the staff or the area. I'll tell you that my question is coming specific to some concerns that I had about the 4th grade rolling ceremony at some of the elementary schools. I volunteered at Hannah, and so I saw all the teachers and the staff at Hannah with masks on and practicing social distancing, but I don't believe that that was the case at all the elementary schools, and I'll be honest that we can handle this separately if that's more appropriate, but I thought this might be an opportunity to ask about any protocols that we are considering for next year for testing, and really just holding staff accountable for practicing social distancing and for wearing masks. I'll be honest, this is a terrible way to start our meeting, I'm sorry, but I was really, really upset and angry that I saw some staff members, quite a few of them at some elementary schools, not wearing masks for some of those 4th grade rolling ceremonies. So if this isn't an appropriate forum to raise that concern, then I can table that. But I wanted to use this opportunity. I feel like it sort of falls under Building and Grounds to have somebody address that.
So, I mean, I will tell you, first of all, I would suggest that if you had concerns of that nature, always call, and I'm the person that you should start with. So I would, want to hear from you if you have those questions. I actually attended 2 of them, and in the 2 that I were at, everyone was wearing masks. I was there. I wasn't there for the whole duration of the ceremony, and I know that Dot was at the other 3 schools, so I hadn't heard that concern from anyone else before. In terms of our plan, we are working and beginning our plan. We are still, the famous line, awaiting guidance from the Department of Ed. We have met as a task force within the internal leadership team to begin the conversations about that, but we anticipate some information coming the end of this week or the beginning of next week that will help better guide our planning in terms of what will be required for protocols. We have some idea of what we'll be looking at, but in general, it will become more clear as time goes on. So we have received the supply list, the safety supply list, so we know in general what PPE is being expected, and we are planning for the provisioning of that, working in conjunction with the nurses, the lead nurse, June Kazis, and our Mike Collins on the city side, as well as with Jean and the COVID task force for the municipal side of the city. So, we have been doing a lot of preliminary investigating and planning and trying to see, what will be happening with that guidance. As soon as it comes out, will help guide some of that. So I share your I guess one of the things that we talked about at length was we know that the public is going to have some questions, and we want to make sure that we are very clear and provide all the information that we need to as soon as we have it available for everybody. So we know that we need to provide, what are we doing around cleaning? What are our protocols? All of that information will be shared with the public. It's just not ready at this time.
Yeah, I guess the follow-up to that might be, and I don't necessarily expect you to have the answer for this right now, but I think the follow-up might be to that. We have protocols for what, for example, we should have been doing at the 4th grade ceremonies, and it didn't really seem like staff was following that at all of the schools. I know they were at Hannah, and I can only speak for the school that I was at. But once those guidelines are available and the protocols are available, what are we doing to hold staff accountable? Because that I'll be honest, that gave me some great concern for sending my kids back to school in the fall, and I know I'm not alone. Concern. Yeah,
we would be addressing that same way we would address any other expectation. I mean, we hold our when we set expectations for staff, it's our intention and it's my expectation that we hold staff to those expectations. So, I don't know the situation that you talked about. I certainly am happy to talk with you later offline, and you can share with me what you heard. I did not hear. This is the first that I've heard of any of that. So and as I said, I was at 2 of the schools, and Dot was at all 5 throughout the course of the day at different times. So, we were had our eyes very keenly on what was happening and where it was going. I can assure you that the time that I was at Centerville and the time that I was at Cove, there was no one that was there with no masks on. So I probably spent 30 to 35 minutes at each building. So, that's all I can speak to right now. I thought the rolling rally ceremonies were extremely well planned and extremely well executed. We got a lot of very positive feedback. It was a very emotional and exciting time for both our students and the families and for our staff members. And so, I thought, this is the first that I'm hearing of it. So if you have, no one else has reached out to me with that. So I'm happy to take any information you have later offline.
Sure, I'll definitely share it with you separately. Yeah, it wasn't any of the schools that you mentioned, so I'll reach out to you separately. If you don't know about it, then it's fair enough that you should get a more specific heads up about some of the concerns. It was really upsetting. I'll share it with you separately.
Okay.
Okay, any other, before we move to the next item on the agenda, any other comments on our facilities, on the B&G report? Okay, our next item on the agenda is our end of the year audit report. And
Yes.
what I will say is every year we are blessed to have Ms. Sherborne as our finance director in our schools, and we get audited, and usually this audit report comes back and it's just absolutely glowing. And so Ms. Sherborne, if you would let us know what the audit report says in a summary this year, if you're holding your track record of being
No findings.
the gold star.
Yes, so each year we do an end-of-year financial report that gets submitted to the Department of Education, and we're required to have independent auditors come out and review our end-of-year report. And this year, like a few years, there's been a couple of years that we haven't, there is no findings on the report at all. The only thing that they do mention, which Ms. Abel has put up on page 2, is the specific requirement that the district should have a indirect charge to indirect cost to grants, but we don't do that. So it's not anything that we get any kind of findings on, but while completing this, they note that we don't charge indirect costs to the grant. So we pretty much use the grants for grant necessary things. So we don't put any money into our general fund from the grants. But there is no findings, perfect report.
Fantastic. Your streak lives.
Thank you, yes.
Excellent. And thank you. Congratulations. And thank you.
All right. Ms. Abel, can I have you put up the update first, so I can just give a little update before we go through the revenue? And so each month I've been trying to do is give a little overview of what's going to be presented. So the first thing we have here is our administrative updates, and we're going to be talking about the FY20 budget update, revenues, expenses, and transfers. And I've been trying to give a little overview of what's going on in the business department. And so what we're doing is we're processing the payroll is ongoing. The teacher balloon payment will be processed this week. Just for information, Unit A members receive 26 equal biweekly payments for their contract year. The balloon payment is equivalent to 5 biweekly payrolls. So they get 21 biweekly checks, and then they get 1 check, which will be issued tomorrow, which is equivalent to 5 weeks that gets them, some funds for the summer. The accounts payable, we're processing warrants on a weekly basis, and the final warrant for FY20 will be in mid-July. So even though the fiscal year ends on June 30th, we have a couple weeks to get all the invoices processed. And that's everything needs to be encumbered and closed out at that time. And we are currently have a lot of scholarships that we're reviewing for FY21. Mainly they are for the laptop one-to-one program right now, but we will be getting them for transportation soon. My FY20 budget concerns, excuse me, which we've been checking off each month. And so we've issued the athletic refunds, kindergarten, preschool, and we've started to do some transfers of expenses to and from the revolving account to the appropriated account to maintain the revolving account balances that we need for next year's budget offsets. And I'm currently looking at all of the revolving account balances and reviewing them because the year end will be fast approaching on my part. The next steps is to process those final payrolls, continue to review those for deficit, the accounts for deficits and surpluses, encumbering end of year expenses, and then of course do the end of year, and we'll return funds to the general fund. Currently, I'm anticipating that that's going to be approximately $250,000 that will return, but until all of the bills come in, that is an estimate, but I can assure you that it will not be less than that. And so I can go on to review the financial reports, and if anybody has any questions, but if anybody wants any questions on how we do what I just talked about, I can take questions.
Right, so I'm looking in the participant panel, if anybody wants to put their hand up or put their hand up in front of their camera, if anybody has any general questions before we go into the reports. I don't see any. So our first report, I will say, Madam President, Assistant Superintendent Flaherty has joined us on the roll call side of things. And our first report is the revenues report.
Okay, so the report you see in front of you does have a small change in the total city appropriations. And forgive me, I don't remember the exact amount, but when we do our transfers, you'll see it in the custodial salaries one. And it was 14,000, nope. So the city appropriation has been increased by a small amount. That was some 16,464. So that that plus minus that shows the 337,295 has been increased this month in the amount of 16,464, which you will be voting a budget transfer later on, and that was for a custodial salary agreement that the city agreed upon, so therefore they gave us the additional funds for just this year for just that cost. The other thing that you'll notice on here is under school choice, we have $64,297 that will be our June payment coming in, excuse me, that we receive monthly. The circuit breaker revenue, we're still expecting the final quarter, which is $579,470. And the special education tuition of $72,125 will be coming from other communities that send their children to us that we're anticipating that they will be paying us because we are still providing remote services to their students. In the fees area, transportation revolving had student O's of $7,110. Building rental, we had 174 that is still for minor rentals that we received before we closed that is still outstanding. Preschool revolving, $3,765, and kindergarten revolving, $16,676. So those two are fees that we're still going to be collecting on. We just have not been, during this pandemic, actively pursuing people, but they're still due. So we are anticipating, and we have been getting some payments in, but while people were out of work, we didn't want to be the collectors going after it, but it will be there, and we'll be asking in the fall when they try to go for something else. So that's all I have for the revenues. Any questions? No.
I don't see any hands. Our next item is expenses.
Okay, so I did remember this month to give you the 3 different reports. So we have the SO1, which is the biggest one, which is the 38-page report, and that is our appropriation. And so this was run on June 18th, so we still had the teachers' payroll has not been processed, so it looks like we have a lot of money at this time that is still available, but when that final payroll's processed, then that dwindles down. I guess if anybody has any specific questions they want to ask, I mean, this is where we have to make sure that, you know, everything ties out. It's a moving target. If we have people that are taking days without pay and their balloon check is going to be less than 5 times, then that can be an adjustment. We are doing some purchasing at the end of the year for leases and software agreements that actually expire at the last quarter. We're paying for those. So I guess if there's any specific questions, I'm welcome to them.
So
this is where everything is.
As a general rule of thumb, Ms. Sherburne, is it fair to say that once you run the last payroll and we vote these final transfers, pretty much everything will be at a 0 balance, or for sure it'll be at a 0 balance by 6 days from now on the last day of the month?
Yes, so what it will be, I can assure you, is that we will have a balance of $250,000 that will be rolling back to the city. So we'll do that. So right now I'm looking at things back to the revolvings. I'm looking at our revolvings to make sure that we have a balance enough in there to cover the offsets that we have budgeted for next year because of the unknown. If we're going to be able to have school like we do, if we're going to be able to get fees, if we're going to be able to rent the buildings, are we going to be able to, you know, transport? There's so many things up in the air. So therefore, I am ensuring that our revolving accounts have the balances. So if I, you know, have some extras in one of these accounts, we'll make sure that we shift them around so that we can move things into like circuit breaker revolving. And this is something that I discuss with the city finance director. He's aware of, you know, we want to make sure that we don't need to go next year looking for money for something. So
right. And from my last question, and I don't see any hands, but I'll ask again if there's because I believe maybe Ms. Coelho started to put her hand up. From a process point of view, that last return back to the city, will this body need to vote on that? Will that come in front of us as a transfer of a certain type, or?
No, what we do is that there'll be a remaining balance that will automatically goes to the general fund.
Okay,
so,
fantastic.
Yep, so there'll be no vote. What you will find is that I have some transfers for you tonight. That's not going to be all of the transfers for the remainder in the 6 days. So what I generally do is one large transfer at the end of the year, I bring forth to the September Finance and Facilities meeting too. But, you know, it's after the fact transfer. It's just what's left.
We're going to be close. We're going to be in the ballpark.
We are.
If baseball gets to start back up. All right.
Yes, I heard it's going to.
I heard so too.
I do see Mr. Manzo's hand going up.
Oh, fantastic. Mr. Manzo, please.
Jean, you've been doing this for a few years now, right?
It's been 9 years, Paul.
9 years. So a surplus of $250 on a $60 million budget, is that usual? Is that
That is very unusual. I have to tell you, in the 9 years that I've been here, I've only returned funds to the city once other time, and it was about $1,000, and it was because a encumbrance got closed before I caught it. So generally speaking, we do not return any funds to the city.
But we sometimes do have surpluses at the end of the year that we use for other things.
Yes, a lot sometimes, and this is what I'll be discussing with the superintendent as late as Monday, is, you know, if there's something that we need to purchase. So sometimes what happens is if we have something that's on our list of we really want to get next year, but we really weren't going to be able to do it, and it's a one-time. I'm going to use an example of, you know, auto scrubber is one of our top things that we need in buildings and grounds. So if I scrolled back to the buildings and grounds area, which was BG's around page 6 or 7, in that range, you'll see that there's some funds there available. So what I tried to do is look at it to see what is actually here. So I'm looking, I see 27,000 just in the overtime line, which is what we expect. We expected that there's no money left. I mean, there's going to be money left because we had a closure. We didn't have overtime. So in that case, I want to look at this and say, okay, we have, you know, and Ms. Abel is showing me the BG 740 area, another 26. So what I will do is I will look at all of this. I'll make sure that the buildings and grounds building rental revolving has enough. I'd offset it with this because that's what the fund is for. And then if not, I'll say, you know, can we just go and purchase that because we weren't able to put it in the budget? We're really going to need it. That's a one-time that we may spend. But my top priority, in addition to our revolving accounts, is to be able to turn back $250,000 to the city because that's what we have, I'm not going to say promised, but suggested that we would be able to do.
Well, I just wanted to comment that, again, to get this close on a $60 million budget, to get on the plus side, you know, a small plus, is testament to your abilities and the fiscal management abilities of the school committee watching this budget over the years.
Yes.
And I want to say, especially given that there were some expenses that you just had no idea were coming this year. And so I just want to commend you and everyone else who are responsible for watching this budget. I think you did a great job.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you too, Mr. Manzo. You're a member of the F&F committee. I thank you profusely, as well as our other members of the public.
Welcome.
Ms. Bisnick, I'm not sure if there's anyone else that had any questions. I can only see 6 people.
I only see Mr. Manzo. Mr. Manzo, will you put your hand down now in the participants panel? Now that we've called on you, thank you. I don't see any other hands up in the participants panel. Like, here's last call if anybody wants to unmute and say anything before we go to our transfers.
Yep. I just want to add, Ms. Business, that the other 2 expenditure reports with the SO2 grant as a state grants and SO3 is federal grants. The SO2 grants, those end on 6/30, so we are working with the nurse leader. She has showed us where those expenses are going to be. That's actually transfers that need to go in there. And then the 222 grant, so the S20 222 grant, the turnaround assistance grant, will be working with the assistant superintendent. And that may be that they're allowing us to roll over a small bit, but this grant was for a specific reason. So therefore, and it actually was reduced because of that we couldn't do what we needed to do that during the time of the pandemic. So they would be giving us the remaining funds next year. And then the SO3 are our federal grants, and these go until August 30th and actually roll over into the next fiscal year. So I'm not worried about those at the time.
Fantastic.
And then I think the next thing we have is transfers.
Yes, ma'am.
The first transfer that I'd like to talk about is the custodial transfer for salaries, which was increasing the appropriation by $16,464, and that was going to the specific custodial salaries that had to do with that.
Okay,
so I think
I'm laughing because I see Miss Abel turning her head sideways, as am I, to read the report.
Oh, sorry. I think I did better on the other one. I figured out how to put it in the copier.
You absolutely did. And this one's really small, so it's really not that big a deal. I couldn't help but laugh when I saw Miss Abel's head turn as mine was turning. I was trying not to turn my head.
If we can get the whole committee to approve these, so not just the finance and facilities, that's one of the reasons why we wanted the committee of the whole in here, so that maybe we can get these done in one evening so we don't have to bring them to the next full school committee.
Madam President, how do you wish to handle that?
Well, why don't you call your roll, and then I'll call our roll.
Okay. All right.
So this would be increasing the appropriation by $16,464 and allocating the funds to the custodial salary account lines, respectively.
And again, to be very clear, Ms. Sherburne, that additional $16,464 has been provided by the city to be injected into our overall budget. You covered that on a previous report.
Yes.
Fantastic. Do you have a motion for this transfer, please? Any hand? Oh, you have to. Oh, Mr. Manzo, I believe I saw your hand go up.
So
Mr.
moved.
Manzo, thank you. I need a second.
Second.
Miss Robinson, thank you. All right, any comments or questions, discussion on this before we do our roll call vote? Don't see any hands going up. All right, here we go. I will try to change the order. Ms. Ducharme.
Yes.
Fantastic, thank you. Ms. Coelho.
Yes.
Fantastic, thank you. Mr. Manzo.
Yes.
Fantastic, thank you. Ms. Coelho? Miss Robinson.
Yes.
Going in weird order, trying not to always do the same order as a goal, all right, but then I lose track. All right, myself, yes. So Ms. Laura, I believe that passes with a vote of 5-0. And
for the Committee of the Whole, I will make the motion that we approve the transfer of $16,464 into our appropriated budget to cover the custodial as outlined in this budget transfer request of June 10th. Do I have a second?
So moved.
Kelly Ferretti will second that.
Oh, okay. I got 2 seconds there. And I will call the roll. Mayor Cahill, I see him as absent. Kim Coelho?
Yes.
Kelly Ferretti?
Yes.
Karen Robinson?
Yes.
John Milady?
Yes.
Lorinda Visnick?
Yes.
And Rachel Abel, yes. By 6-0, the motion has passed for that transfer. Thank you, Ms. Sherburne.
The next transfer I have is number 255.
Yeah.
And this is for various accounts, and mainly this is a very long transfer, and this was moving funds to increase the computer equipment and the computer software. That's primarily where the money was going to, and it was coming from accounts all across the cost centers. And this was to purchase, Dr. Schrochek, was it iPads for grade 5?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, I would accept a motion to approve this particular transfer from my FNFers.
A motion to approve.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Thank you, Ms. Coelho.
Second.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Mr. Ducharme. Any comments or questions for either the superintendent? Oh, yes, Mr. Manzo, please unmute.
I think I did.
Yes.
So one of the things I noticed in looking through this report and also the expense report is actually directly related to a question that Jeff Silver had last month. We talked about how that's why we're not saving a lot of money because we're using more technology. And I think that's a common thought is that if you give computers to everyone, somehow you can run your school system cheaper. And I think the answer is here. The money that you saved on textbooks and interdisciplinary supplies in the expense report it all went to these computers and software licenses and everything else. And so we shouldn't assume that because we're using technology that everything is going to be able to run more affordably. I think the money just is going to go in a different part of the bucket or a different bucket. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. So any other comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote, and I'm just going in whatever order you guys are on my screen. Ms. Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Manzo?
Yes.
Ms. Coelho?
Yes.
Ms. Ducharme?
Yes.
And myself, yes. So Laura, that's a 5-0.
And for the committee of the whole, I will make the motion that we approve the transfers as outlined in the 6-page report that Ms. Sherburne has presented for the various accounts. And I'm looking for a second.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Visnick. And I will do the roll call vote. Mayor Cahill, I see him as absent. Kimberly Coelho?
Yes.
Kelly Ferretti?
Yes.
Karen Robinson?
Yes.
John Milady?
Yes.
Lorinda Visnick?
Yes.
And Rachel Abel, yes. By a vote of 6-0, the motion is passed. Thank you, Ms. Sherburne.
Thank you. The next transfer I have is number 479, dated 6/16. And this was primarily done for the transportation department for our special education transportation and our non-instructional transportation, which is primarily the homeless transportation. And this was necessary for us to be able to provide payment to our vendors at reduced rates. So they did come up with between 60 and I think it was 64% instead of their full contracts. And that's what other communities were also paying their contracted vendors, so that you have continuity of having the vendors available for when we open in the fall. So we needed to take the funds from other areas to cover that.
Okay, I'm looking for a motion from my FNF team to approve this set of transfers.
So moved.
Fantastic.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Manzo. Do I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Are there any comments or questions from Ms. Sherburne about this particular transfer? It's approximately 2 pages of various accounts that have been scrubbed to make room for the money to pay our special ed transportation in order to hold those services for our reopening. All right, seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Manzo?
Aye. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Robinson?
Yes.
Ms. Coelho?
Thank you, Dave.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Ducharme?
Yes.
Fantastic. Myself, yes. Thank you. That passes 5-0.
And
Madam
for the
President?
for the committee of the whole, I will make the motion. So I'm just looking for a second to do the transportation related transfers as outlined in Ms. Sherburne's report.
Again, I will second your motion, Madam President.
Thank you. By roll call vote, I still don't see Mayor Cahill, so absent. And we have Kimberly Coelho.
Yes.
You anticipated me, okay. And Kelly Ferretti.
Yes.
And Karen Robinson.
Yes.
And John Milady.
Yes.
And Lorinda Visnick.
Yes.
And Rachel Abel, yes. By a vote of 6-0, the motion for those transfers has passed.
Thank you. So the next thing I have is the grants. And we have some grants to have approved by the committee. What I have in here is the MCC Grants, which is the Massachusetts Creative Council on We have 2 yellow school bus grants for $250 each, one for the high school, one for AIRS, and those are primarily used for field trips. And then the STARS residency program, the middle school, Cove, and AIRS received $4,800, $5,000, and $4,300. So therefore, I'm looking for approval or acceptance of $14,600 for the MCC grants.
May I have a motion from someone on our committee? Who would ever say no to free money? Are there any comments or questions, Ms. Sherburne, on these grants? Seeing none, we'll go through our vote again. We'll try to go upside down this time, bottom to top. Ms. Ducharme?
Yes. Yes.
Ms. Coelho?
Yes.
Ms. Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Manzo?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Very happily, yes. That passes 5-0.
Laura, I just want to add that that's a Massachusetts Cultural Council. I said creative, but that's what Munis calls it, but it's the Massachusetts Cultural Council grants. The next set of grants.
Do you want the committee to accept this money too, so we can count it?
Oh, that would be lovely.
Okay. So on behalf of the committee of the whole, I will make the same motion, and I'm looking for a second.
So moved.
Second.
Sure. Whatever, Ms. Abel.
Okay. We'll give that one to Kelly Ferretti. We'll get another one in the books there. Mayor Cahill, I still don't see you, so we'll go to Kim Coelho.
Yes.
Sorry, Kimberly. Kelly Ferretti.
Yes.
Karen Robinson.
Yes.
John Mullady.
Yes.
Lorinda Visnick.
Yes.
Rachel Abel, yes. By a vote of 6-0, the motion to accept those grants has been passed.
Thank you. The next grants I have, these will be actually expended in FY21, but they were given to us in FY20, so figured I'd bring them forward since it was done before our last F&F meeting. And these are from the Beverly Education Foundation grants that we just received last Wednesday. And the total comes to $8,950, and all of the schools benefited from those grants.
Oh, okay. So that's fantastic. That's just one of my favorite things to do. I'm looking for a motion that we accept that money from the Beverly Education Foundation.
So moved.
Okay. I believe that was Ms. Coelho and Ms. Robinson.
No, disarms.
Okay. Sorry. Okay.
It's okay.
Any comments or questions? All right. Let's vote. Mr. Manzo.
Yes.
Fantastic, thank you. Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
Ms. Coelho,
Yes.
Ms. Ducharme,
Yes.
and myself, yes, that's 5-0. Laura from FNF.
And on behalf of the committee of the whole, I will make the same motion that we accept the Beverly Ed grants with gratitude. And I'm looking for a second.
Second.
Thank you. I saw Karen Robinson first. I'm going to do roll call vote. I still do not see Mayor Cahill, so absent. Kimberly Coelho,
Yes.
Kelly Ferretti,
Yes.
Karen Robinson,
Yes.
John Mullady,
Yes.
and Rachel Abel, yes. By a vote of 6-0, we have accepted those grants.
Thank you very much. And then I have the gifts to schools for the month of May and June. And I believe it was a total of $10,171.30.
I have 14,431.29.
Yes, that's because I printed it out before when it was only May, and she did May and June for me as I asked her to.
Okay.
So what is that total?
It's $14,431.29.
Okay. So therefore, I would like to have that be accepted.
All right,
And
I will make the motion that we accept that. I'm looking for a second.
A
Ms. Coelho's- Okay, Ms. Coelho's hand is up. Thank you very much. for everybody following along at home, I'm just going to run down. Some money is from Beverly High, the Stop and Shop A+ rewards. Ayers is getting a Whole Kid Foundation grant. The Hannah Elementary School has Box Tops for Education, a Whole Kid Foundation grant. Helen Skeffington Trust 4th grade gift. Stop and Shop A+ rewards, and district-wide there's money from Project Bread Rapid Response Grant and a citywide PTO donation for technology for the hot spots. All right, are there, now that I've described that, are there any questions on this set of gifts to schools? I see none. Seeing none, we'll run through our roll call. Ms. Ducharme.
Yes.
Fantastic. Ms. Coelho.
Yes.
Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
Mr. Manzo.
Yes.
Myself, yes. Thank you very much. That's a vote of 5-0 in FNF.
And on behalf of the Committee of the Whole, I'll make the same motion that we accept $14,431.29 graciously. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Coelho. And I'll call the roll. Mayor Cahill's absent. Kimberly Coelho?
Yes.
Kelly Ferretti?
Yes.
Karen Robinson?
Yes.
John Milady?
Yes.
Lorinda Visnick?
Yes.
And Rachel Abel, yes. By a count of 6-0, we have graciously accepted those gifts to our schools. Thank you.
Okay. Back to our agenda.
So I think that is it for the FNF. I think we're now going into the Committee of the Whole items.
Very well.
I believe that to be true. And so, Madam President, I would just like to take this opportunity to tell our members of the public who serve with us on FNF, thank you. The end of the school year is, I believe this is our last FNF meeting for this particular school year. I thank you for your service. If you are so moved, you may stay on for the rest of this meeting, but you're certainly welcome to drop off.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, for the Committee of the Whole, we had an agenda item tonight to possibly take action on the solar RFP that we've discussed in our prior meetings. However, we weren't able to conduct the preparatory meetings that we needed. So we will put that off to a future agenda unless we hear otherwise from the mayor. The next item that we have on our agenda is to approve the meeting records from our FY21 public hearing on our budget, as well as the committee meeting that followed thereafter. So let's take them one at a time. Do I have a motion to approve the public hearing minutes?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. And a second?
Second.
I just heard John a half second before you, Ms. Ferretti. We'll put him on the record there. And again, these were for May 28th, just to be clear. Were there any edits or corrections? They were relatively short. We had one speaker. Okay, I'm going to quickly call the roll. Mayor Cahill, still absent. Kim Coelho?
Yes.
Kelly Ferretti?
Yes.
Karen Robinson?
Yes.
John Milady?
Yes.
Lorinda Visnick?
Yes.
And Rachel Abel, yes. By a vote of 6-0, we have approved those records. We also have our meeting that followed on May 28th. Do I have a motion to approve that record?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you. I think that was Ms. Ferretti. I have
Yes, it was.
I have you in speaker view instead of gallery view, so let me just make sure I can see everyone again. Okay, same roll call. Mayor Cahill still appears to be absent. Kimberly Coelho.
Yes.
Kelly Ferretti.
Yes.
Karen Robinson.
Yes.
John Milady.
Yes.
Lorinda Visnick.
Yes.
And Rachel Abel, yes. By a vote of 6-0, we've accepted those meeting records as well. The next item is a budget discussion. And I don't know if Dr. Churchick, you had anything you wanted to share, or if this was more general.
It's more general. Do you want me to
Go ahead,
just
Jean. Go ahead.
What we needed to bring forward was, as you recall, that we had a reduction of what we were moving forward with the city for budget for next year by $100,000. So we are bringing forward a budget reduction transfer from our public hearing document to the actual, and where will we finding those funds. So $57,061 is coming out of the salary contingency line of AD 700-61013. And $42,939 is coming from the health insurance line of OT 800-62810. So the reasoning for those two items is the salary contingency. We didn't have anything that was earmarked for that for next year. And the health insurance, we've heard of 2 to 3 new hires that have talked about that are replacing people that did have health insurance that would not need health insurance. So we're figured that that would be the best place to take it from at this time.
I'd make a motion that we approve the administration's recommendation to transfer those funds out, seeing as we had $100,000 that was not in our final amount. I'm still waiting to hear from City Council to see what they do tonight for our actual appropriation, but in the meantime, I have that motion.
Second.
And thank you, Ms. Visnick. Do we have any further questions about this $100,000 that we needed to take out from the public budget document? I think you did a great job, Ms. Sherburne, explaining it. Let's do a roll call vote. Mayor Cahill, are you with us? No, still absent. Kimberly Coelho?
Yes.
Kelly Ferretti?
Yes.
Karen Robinson?
Yes.
John Malady?
Yes.
Lorinda Visnick?
Yes.
And Rachel Abel, yes. By a vote of 6-0, we have approved that budgetary transfer. Okay. Was there anything else with regard to the budget discussion, or was just that?
No, that's all. No, that's all I had at this time.
Okay.
And we'll waiting to hear from the City Council on their approving the budget tonight.
Yes, we'll keep our fingers crossed here.
That's right.
Okay. So that brings us to our policy, BCB, item number 10. And if I could ask Ms. Ferretti to just give us a reminder about this particular edit that we're getting now for our second reading tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, this was actually part of the original recommendation, but it was inadvertently omitted from when we did the vote the first time around. We made our original edits, and obviously when the first part was recommended by the subcommittee, we edited the second part because if the policy was edited, there's no reason to have an exception to a policy that doesn't exclude employees. And I felt that, since we did vote to recommend this part as well, that it is something we should vote on because, not just because we discussed it in subcommittee, but also given the feeling of the majority of the committee on having a law that, a policy that supersedes the law. I felt that this part, making an exception, flies in the face of what the majority felt. So we should have the opportunity to remove this part and vote on the edit that the subcommittee is recommending so that we have a policy that goes across the board and is consistent.
Thank you, Ms. Ferretti. Before we entertain any motions, I was hoping that we could get some clarification from either Ms. Sherburne or Dr. Churchick if we had any known employees that would fall under the clause that we're looking to strike that are currently working in our district. I probably should have submitted the question a little bit sooner because it's hard when people change names and whatnot. But In particular, what we're trying to affirm is that people that had a relationship who was hired before a committee member or the superintendent came into office or into their role would be essentially, it shall not apply. So just wanted to see if we would be creating any situations or they would be grandfathered in even if we were to strike this paragraph as the policy subcommittee had recommended.
I don't, so John, I would have to have John absolutely say it. I'm not aware of any relationships. I know that in the past we had one, but that committee member's no longer on the committee.
Right.
And that was grandfathered in, the committee, was made aware, the committee was made aware of it and everyone knew that. And, but I don't know right now of any conflict that we have at this point in time.
Okay.
Donna is sitting there. I'm trying to see if she's trying to tell me yes or no. She knows sometimes more than I do.
I don't know offhand.
Yeah. So I personally can affirm that I don't have any relatives working in the district presently. Right. And so, removing this from our policy now would have no effect to any of my kinship, I guess is the word that the favor of kinship. Okay. I don't know if any other members had any questions before we entertain a motion to strike the paragraph. Ms. Visnick?
So is it fair to generalize this as a grandfather clause, although that may not be a very politically correct term in our current culture? So as Dr. Chorocek said, we had a committee member to which this applied, and so I guess I kind of want to delve into that a little bit. If there's someone who's already employed, and then the public elects an employee's spouse, and that's the scenario that we had. Mr. Goodwin was hired. Right. We would turn around and say, no, you can't run for office because your spouse is already employed in the school district. And I understand the reverse is not desired. If we are already sitting, that it would be absolutely a conflict of interest for us to hire one of our kins. Is that the word, Ms. Adele?
So I see Ms. Ferretti's hand, and I also had a couple points. So Ms. Ferretti, why don't you go first?
I just wanted to, I feel since we discussed that relationship, whether what came first was not something that the majority wanted to support, I think it is fair to say that if you already have someone working in the district, that the spouse or relative, parent, sibling, whatever, cannot run for office. As we discussed in the prior meeting when the first part of the recommendation was put forth to the committee, we have to make decisions. And if someone is already committing their time to a role that's in employment, then just as that person couldn't apply for a job if a person were on the school committee or the superintendent, the same goes the other way. I just feel that if we do not support this recommendation, we'll be in conflict with what we talked about when we voted not to accept the edits of the first part.
So from my perspective, I did look at the nepotism laws, and I have mixed feelings. I think that we experienced last term what it means to the body when we have to take considerations with negotiating contracts, considering payrolls, payroll warrants, regular warrants, salary increases. We're not in a position in school committee to do any direct hiring other than the superintendent and to approve recommendations. But I do feel that, negotiating contracts is something for which an elected official would have a financial interest if their spouse's parent, children, siblings, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, or other, close relations or kinships that have an impression of favoritism. So if we could strike this without impacting anything that is currently in place, I just remain confused about, what would happen if someone chose to run for office. We have so very few people running for office, mostly uncontested seats. You know, would we be obligated to resolve the conflict? Either the person couldn't actually take office and we'd have to look at the second largest vote getter, which is generally not meeting our charter, or, you know, how would we handle, you know, a situation? So, Ms. Freddie, it looks like you've done some homework, maybe.
Yeah, we discussed this and I thought about this. I mean, it would be the same on the other side. You know, if someone holds an office and someone applies for a position, you have to inform all parties involved of the current policy, and that both parties involved can make the decision on what they want to do. Of course, we would have the 1-year waiting period that is in the policy now. Mm-hmm. So, you know, unfortunately, it would be a situation where if someone wanted to run and they're, as defined by our policy, their relative was working, they would need to make the decision of not to run at that time, or if their relative were to quit the position, the next term they could consider running, because that would be over 1 year. I mean, I just feel if we're doing it on one end, we need to be consistent. You know, it just seemed contradictory to say we don't allow it on this end, but we allow it on the other end.
Ms. Visnick?
I can see both sides of this, and I guess I feel like when you're running for office, and as you say, Ms. Abel, we often have, sometimes we have to go recruit our replacements when we want to retire, and we have too few, thank you, people wanting to get involved, and perhaps for good reason. But I think that's certainly like much more than the state average of, or the state mandated give 2 weeks notice and let people decide. I mean, if the public wants someone, the difference in the two, it's not a conflict, because the difference in the two is that if the public wants someone to hold office, regardless of whether their spouse is an employee already, right, that already employee doesn't have any say other than their own vote at the ballot box, whether the person earns the seat or not. So I don't really think that it's apples to apples, but I could go the other way too. I don't understand. I would hate to think about Mr. Goodwin not serving. He was a fantastic public servant. Right. And yes, there was some burden on the rest of us because there were some things where he had to recuse himself. But that is absolutely not equal to saying I want the school district to hire my husband to be the physical therapist or the athletic trainer in the athletic department. Those things are simply not on par with one another.
Okay, Ms. Freddie, I see your hand.
Yeah, it's just, as you had stated, Mrs. Abel, the school committee has no role in hiring any staff member. That's in the wheelhouse of the superintendent and the administration. So, it's not as if we're saying, I want you to hire my child or my spouse or whatever the case may be. If there's a position, you could see both sides of it. If there's a position that is looking for a candidate that's very unique and the recruitment might be very difficult. And, if we're going to use that excuse that it's just hard to get people to run, then, I think we need to apply it to both sides as we discussed before.
Yeah. So I just want to clarify my statement. We don't have, direct hiring, but we are the employee of record and we do enter into contracts. And I think that's where I struggle a little bit, knowing that we would be one short on, signing of a unit contract, for instance, or being in a position to, authorize COLAs or other types of benefits for which the employee would financially benefit. But more importantly, I think the issue of appointments or promotions was something else that I was concerned about. Just the unwarranted privilege or the impression of favoritism is within the nepotism law. And that's something that, I would not want to burden our superintendent with any decision based on, you know, wanting our favor, for instance, since we're collectively her boss. So yeah, it's sort of like I see both sides of it, and I just worry, I guess, a little bit more about the operational aspects of signing the unit contracts and authorizing any sort of financial increases or promotion opportunities to employees. So 6 of one, half dozen the other for me. So I guess it's a matter of are we going to take a motion this evening to strike the paragraph, and we'll just have to figure out what to instruct the superintendent to do if we do discover anyone that's been hired. But, or do we want to table it and, you know, Ms. Ferretti?
I mean, this was something that was discussed back in January in the subcommittee, so I would make a motion to vote on the recommendation of the policy subcommittee to strike that paragraph that is in our packets and go from there.
Okay, there's a motion to strike the paragraph as indicated by the track changes in our packet. Do I have a second? Thank you, Ms.
I'll
Robinson.
second it.
Oh, I saw Ms. Robinson first. I'm sorry, John, but thank you.
Not offended. I finally turned the camera on and
That's all
don't
right.
even get the set.
Okay. I know we had a lot of discussion before we reached the motion, because I just wanted to make sure we had the motion that we wanted to bring the vote forward, since we have to do the roll call. But I don't want to limit any other comments. If any other members had questions or comments.
I have a comment. I want to say thank you to the subcommittee for bringing it forward. And, you know, I think like everyone else who's spoken, I see, you know, both sides of this issue. I think for our community, it's I don't know if unique is the right word, but with so many people in our community employed by the city or employed by the schools, I can see this becoming a potential, you know, challenge in case you want to get involved, but you have a family member that's employed by the community. I also like Lorinda's logic that, you know, you're letting people at the ballot box make the decision if they think this could be a problem, and if they're okay with it, you know, it's a democracy, and they can go forward. But I also think that if we have the potential to prevent a future school committee or a future superintendent from having an issue when it comes to warrants or when it comes to making it, you know, whatever decision it is. I think, you know, we owe it to ourselves and we owe it to them to prevent a possible problem. So, you know, I think I'm kind of showing my hand where I'm leaning towards. I think this is a very good discussion, and I appreciate the dialogue that we had tonight.
Okay. Are members ready to call the roll? Okay, I still see Mayor Cahill is absent, so I will ask Kimberly Coelho. I think you're on mute.
I don't know to vote yes or no yet, because we're still not sure if it's going to potentially mess up somebody that's already currently employed.
Okay. Would you like? Are you abstaining at this time, or do you want me to call?
I think I'm going to abstain.
Abstain. Okay. No. Okay. Kelly Ferretti.
Yes.
Karen Robinson.
Yes.
John Mulady.
Yes.
Lorinda Visnick.
No.
And Rachel Abel, yes. I have a vote of 4 to 1 to 1, and so the motion has passed. I believe that is a 2/3. I will have to check the policy on policy changes, but I believe 4 out of 6 is exactly 2/3. Mathing. Oh my. Okay. Thank you to the work of the policy committee. We'll make sure that our policy is updated to reflect that. And looking at our agenda, that leaves us one remaining item, and that is to entertain a motion to enter into executive session. Actually, I will make the motion. The chair moves to convene into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, for the following purposes. Purpose number 7 is to review and approve the meeting records from our executive session meeting of, what was it, June 17th? And then the other purpose is purpose number 3, which is to discuss strategy with respect to and in preparation for collective bargaining with the teachers Unit A, because an open discussion may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the committee, and we will not return to open session. So I've made a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. And I will call the roll. Mayor Cahill is absent. Kimberly Coelho?
Yes.
Thank you. Kelly Ferretti?
Yes.
Karen Robinson?
Yes.
John Mulady?
Yes.
Lorinda Visnick?
Yes.
Rachel Abel? Yes. By a vote of 6-0 at 7:48, we are now entering into executive session. I would kindly ask, if you are not invited, to go ahead and drop off. So I guess, Laura, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I think you still have a quorum, Lorinda. I think we forgot to adjourn F&F. We'll call F&F adjourned as of 7:48, since you retained your
My school committee people.
your quorum.
You want me to do a roll call vote?
Yeah, real quick, sure.
All right, Ms. Coelho,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
myself, yes. So FNF is adjourned as of 7:48 by a vote of 3-0.